welcome to the Presbyterian Research Center. My name is Monty Collier. In this video I will be discussing the question, but doesn't the Westminster Confession have a chapter on free will? You may have heard that question before from Arminians. Sinners will go to any length to establish the tradition that men have wills free from God's absolute predestination. They will misinterpret the Bible. They will add the myth of human free will to the Bible, violating Deuteronomy chapter 4 verse 2. And they will even go as far as to misinterpret the Westminster Confession of Faith. For example, sometimes we hear free willers say chapter 9 of the Westminster Confession of Faith is titled On Free Will, so obviously God does not determine the wills of men. This particular objection is an example of the fallacy of equivocation. The term free will is ambiguous, so susceptible to a variety of different meanings, depending on the context in which it is found. The title of chapter 9 does not suggest that men have wills free from God's causation, but it has an entirely different meaning. Free will, in the context of this chapter of the Confession, means that the wills of men are free from the natural world, that is, free from nature. Freedom from nature is called natural liberty. Now, our wills are not determined by physical things. Our wills are not determined by things that are created. Our wills are not determined by the stars, for example, astrology. Our wills are not determined by magic or sorcery, such as voodoo. Our wills are not determined by chemical causation, as we hear in behaviorism. Our wills are not determined by sensations. You can check the philosophies of Thomas Hobbes and David Hume. That's what they like to claim. Even so, the term free will implies that the will is free from something. When the term appears in an indefinite sentence, such as, we have free will, well then it must be asked, what do you think our wills are free from? The Bible says that our wills are never free from God's determination. Check out Proverbs 16:1, Isaiah 46:9 through 11, Acts 17:28, Ephesians 1:11, and so on. In ancient days, kings were thought to have more freedom than any other persons on earth. However, to make the point that no man has a will free from God's causation, the Bible says, and I quote, "The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, as the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will," end quote. Proverbs chapter 21 verse 1. The meaning is clear. God determines all the thoughts and choices of the king's mind. Now compare Proverbs 21 verse 1 with Proverbs 16 verse 1, which states, and I quote, "The preparations of the heart in man, and the answer of the tongue, is from the Lord," end quote. We see that all men, and that includes their wills, are meticulously determined by God. Anything that is determined by God is not free. The wills of men are determined by God. Therefore, the wills of men are not free from God. The logic of the Bible is inescapable. For who hath resisted his will? Romans 9, verse 19. The notion that men have wills free from God's absolute predestination is called divine liberty. We have seen that men were not created with, nor have now, divine liberty, but they do have natural liberty. See Psalm 8 verse 6. This is why the Westminster Confession of Faith says, and I quote, "God hath endued the will of man with that natural liberty, that is neither forced, nor by any absolute necessity of nature, determined to good or evil," end quote. Westminster Confession of Faith, chapter 9, that was Article 1. If by natural liberty the confession meant freedom from God's absolute predestination of all things, then the confession would have contradicted itself, for it already established in a previous chapter that, quote, "God, from all eternity, did by the most wise and holy counsel of his own will, freely and unchangeably ordain whatsoever comes to pass. End quote. Westminster Confession of Faith, chapter 3, verse 1. So the mendacious attempts by Arminians, compatibilists, and Roman Catholics to interpret chapter 9 of the Westminster Confession of Faith so that it means that men have wills free from God's predestination, well, it's simply absurd. God bless.